Welcome to the Better 2 podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is Mike Burgess, aka Vox, from the Chameleons. We talk about their new record, Arctic Moon. We talk about, well, music and his history as a musician. And then we go into politics. So tune in. Hi, Vox. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm
Ooh,
I'm very good.
where are you currently at?
I'm in Berlin.
Berlin. Wow.
Yeah.
So are you
Um,
prepared?
uh, Sorry.
Are you preparing to go on tour or to a show tonight?
I think I was supposed to be going somewhere. I'm not sure. I got a message saying we got by my partner saying we're going out later. So I said, oh,
Oh,
okay. And I tried to find out where we were going, and I didn't get any response. So I'm going somewhere.
it'll be a
I'm
surprise.
yeah, best yeah, yeah. It'll be fun, I'm sure.
So you're currently in the studio, correct? Working on Arctic Moon?
No, that's all finished.
Oh, it's all finished
Um,
now. Okay.
Yeah, it's all finished and mastered and stuff. And I think we've set a date for September 12th.
Okay. Any I know that when I was reading up about it, it's a little bit of a departure from your legacy music. So how would you describe it?
Well, I think they're writing some Mum Show, but we're Mum Show. So I hope. I'd like to
Yeah.
think so anyway. Um, yeah, I mean, the sound kind of is much more reflective of who we are now rather than who we were like 30 years ago. I mean, one of the architects of that sound left the band 20 years ago, and we didn't want to trade on that um, sound. It wasn't our guitar sound. He took it with him, so the band sounds a little different, I think, but you can still recognizably us. Reg and I still bring what we always brought to it, I suppose. But with the new guys, it's giving it a little bit more of a contemporary kind of feel.
Well,
And the songwriting, I think, is Mum Show as well. Whereas like originally we were still very steeped in that post-punk kind of influence, whereas like now we've come back together after all this time, we're celebrating our influences really more accurately with like the 70s and the early 60s. And some, yeah, we never lost that like post-punk influence, but we were able to bring to bear, a lot of the influences that made us want to buy records in the first place. So I think you hear a lot of that on this new record.
well, and I mean, when you talk about writing with maturity, it's a natural progression because I mean, even as an author, I can look at stuff I wrote when I was in high school and cringe, yes. But I didn't have the life experience, and that's the thing. As you mature, what was important back in your 20s may
Yeah,
not be the same thing.
no, that's true. And I mean, I kind of, I mean, when we play the legacy stuff, when I sing the legacy stuff, it still seems really relevant to me, and it seems to me that a part of me kind of had an eye on what was coming. So all of these kind of things that are kind of going on now, I've been talking about for quite a long time, I think. Um, but this is more personal. I think there's a lot more personal things on. I've written about more personally on this record than I have in a long time, I think.
Well, and the thing is, as a younger person, you can look at the world and it goes back to that maturity thing. You're not so focused on your personal growth necessarily. You're focused on what is going on in the world. You can see
Well,
it,
yeah,
I mean, I look back at myself in the 80s and I think, wow, we've progressed so much. Things have changed so much. We don't have as much discrimination. And now I'm sitting here going, yeah, you're an idiot, but that's beside, it's one of those things where it's like you're more hopeful. You look at things with rose-colored glasses at times back then
yeah,
because
sometimes,
you're
yeah,
younger. And as you
yeah,
age and you start seeing the ramifications, that's when it's like, wait a second.
yeah. I mean, I don't know, I'm still I think I think I'm more fixated on personal growth now than I was
Hmm.
in my 20s, my 30s. Uh, and I thought that maybe by the time I got to 60, I wouldn't really be so existential. There's something wrong with you if you're existential in your 60s. If you haven't worked it out by then. But no, I don't think like that anymore. Um, I think if anything, I've probably got more existential as I get older. But then a lot of the themes on this new record are kind of more in the emotional terrain rather than the existential terrain. I think.
Well, and then
Yeah.
there's two schools of thought here. As we age, we do look emotionally at what we're feeling. We're willing to face our past. We're willing
Mm.
to face, most people are. And that also is somewhat existential because it's like, okay, so where am I going? What's my legacy? And it's not legacy necessarily being the big rock star. It's legacy about what my family knows of me, what my friends know of me. What is my legacy for myself? How have
Well,
I
yeah.
taken care of myself?
But it's also, I think, um, more and more. Um, I mean, in order for you to go through that, you have to have a degree of awareness, self-awareness, and I think a lot of people lose that or don't attain that. I think they're not fully aware of themselves. So sometimes it takes something quite dramatic to um, motivate one into becoming a little bit more self-aware, self-critical, self-aware, um, to take accountability, that kind of thing. I think, rather than just get to a point where you just settle out, I am the way that I am. I know what I like. I know what I am. I know who I am. And, half the time we don't really.
No,
I mean, I didn't, I mean, I've always considered myself a romantic, but I didn't, until recently, I didn't really know what love was. I realize now that I didn't have a full understanding of what that was, what it meant. It's only quite recently that I've had that kind of epiphanies, those kinds of epiphanies that have helped me realize that for most of my life I hadn't got a clue what love was. It was all very self-serving in the past, and that's the opposite of what love is. So um, I'm quite happy with that. I'm quite happy that I'm still asking these kinds of questions and still trying to seeking these kinds of answers in myself, and trying to realize, trying to constantly work towards being a better version of myself. So finally when I leave this, I can feel that I did my best, to be a true human being instead of just being self-obsessed.
well, I think that's an important gift in itself because the moment you decide that, you know what, I'm me, like you said, I'm me, I'm not going to change, then you're not growing. And then if you're not growing,
Yeah.
what is life worth? I mean, we're here to learn lessons. We're here to learn how to, I don't want to say navigate life, but to learn empathy and compassion.
To evolve. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. But it's so easy to forget that, or lose sight of that, or not even become aware of it in the first place. With all the distractions and the glamours that life gives us, it's easy to lose sight of those things. Um, and accept that things like humility and empathy aren't weaknesses;
Yeah.
they're strengths.
Yeah.
And these are the very things that we should be nurturing, and these are the things that help us evolve our
Yeah.
our spirits. So, I mean, and I've been fortunate as well in that. Although I think it's true of most people if they really, really realised it, but I've been fortunate in making the kinds of connections with human beings that have really helped me either adversely, even sometimes, even in a devil's advocate kind of way,
Hmm.
into making these kind of realizations and bringing me to these points of awareness. So I'm really grateful for that, for all the people that have been in my life and continue to be there that teach me a lot of things about myself, that I wouldn't otherwise realize probably.
Well, and when you look at, being a younger person and being the person that gets the recording contract that's up on stage, there's an allure to being up on stage and the ego feeds off of that. I'm not saying that you're an egomaniac. I'm generalizing right now because
Oh, for
typically,
sure.
I mean, I've seen girls at clubs look at the guy who is a total geek. No offense to anybody who I'm just giving these stereotypical 1980s geek, total geek. Yet
Yeah.
because he's got a guitar and he's up on stage, he is the hottest thing in the world. But they're not there for that. They're there because they think I can hook up with him and then maybe get somewhere. And it's unfortunate that that is that dynamic and they're not really looking at the person for who they are. And on the same token, then you have the people up on stage going, "Hey, I got everything handed to me," because they're throwing themselves at me now. And so we create this really weird dichotomy when we're younger and idolizing people.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that it really comes down to why you're doing it. You know,
Hmm.
what is the real motivation for doing it? I mean, music has been such a massive part of my life from as long as I can remember. So I mean, it's always been music has been the main thing in my life, really. So doing it was it was I was so immersed in the love of making music and listening to music and stuff. That's all it became about. So all of the glamours that are around it were never really much of an interest to me. And I was with people who felt really the same way. I mean, with Chameleons, we were all kind of like that, really. We didn't really, we weren't seduced by the more glamorous side of it or the ego-driven side of it. We were just wanting to make as good music as we possibly could. We got off on that, and we were enough. It was enough for us to be the best we could be for each other. So I mean, there's one uh, guy, a Manchester musician. I'm not going to name. He used to refer to us as the Christian band because we never really did anything. We never really, we had a reputation for the band that never. We didn't party. We didn't take. We weren't taking lots of cocaine or anything like that. So they called us the Christian band for quite a while, which is quite funny. We were the only, I think, one of the few rock bands out of Manchester that would tidy hotel rooms rather than wreck them. We'd clean up after ourselves.
But here's the thing, and I mean, I want to touch on the fact that you said, you did it because you loved music. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't do. They don't follow their passion. We don't have the luxury of following our passion. We have to take that job that's going to support the family, support everybody. So when you're given the gift
Yeah,
to have the ability to follow your passion, that's something that you treasure. And yeah,
yeah.
if you've seen everybody else partying and trashing hotel rooms and everything, that's going to
Well, I
kind
think
of,
it's kind of you can have that passion even, and then find that the business that you're in and the nature of it and the nature of this kind of deification of rock and roll stars. It can act as a distraction and seduce you away from why you're really doing it, and then the glamours and that become more important. You know,
mhm.
and you find that with people that made it very early, who don't know what it's like not to be famous. They it kind of does something to you. I always think of Michael Jackson. Like
Yeah.
he's. Um, I mean, he was a superstar at like six. He's 7 years old with the Jackson Five, and then never knew what it was like not to be extraordinary. He was always extraordinary and regarded as extraordinary, and that obviously attracts the less savoury elements, shall we say?
Yeah.
Because there's like a vampirism around superstardom, and if one's not careful, one can get seduced by that
Yeah.
to the point where you kind of completely lose your motivation for doing it in the first place. It becomes all about the fame and stuff, and it gets in the way a little bit. I always admired like some of the biggest acts on the planet that were able to kind of navigate that. I think the Beatles navigated it quite well, uh, given that they were like the most famous people on the planet.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that to actually retain that integrity of wanting it to pursue excellence. Regardless of the deification element of it. That they went on from being this incredibly global phenomenon, this pop group, this boy band, really, for want of a better
Hmm.
word. Then to go on to make records like Sergeant Pepper and Abbey Road, I think it's a great testament to
Yeah.
them, and some bands are able to do that. Others get, I think the more you kind of embrace that element of it over the music, the sooner you kind of wither and disappear.
Well,
and
yeah.
become a footnote. I remember there's loads of groups that started really with a lot of integrity. They got seduced by the glamour of it all, and now we're almost forgotten.
Well,
I talk to younger people in the 30s about I'll mention a name and they'll go who, and it's like
yes.
I can't believe they don't know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
But that's because they lost that thing that thing that sustains it. I mean, I didn't would never have imagined in a million years when we did our first record that people would still be wanting us to play it 40 years later. Or people would still be buying it 40 years later, which they are. A lot of young people come to the shows who weren't born when we made those records, and I think it showed that it's a reflection of the amount of integrity we had for what we did. That we didn't get seduced too much by the business and by these fake glamours that occur around you that seem to get in the way and try to stop you from making the music. Actually,
Yeah.
when before we got signed, we used to meet 3 or 4 times a week to write songs. After we got signed, it was all we could do to get together to write once a week. It was all everything kind of gets in the way of it a little bit. Although it's nice, like you say, it's nice to be able to pay your mortgages and have a nice
Yeah.
life as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Life sometimes gets in the way, and
Mm,
I've talked to a couple of people about the fact that when I was working in insurance, when I first started working in insurance, there was one computer in the office that I could take a floppy disk, and during my lunch hour, I would go write. I'd put that floppy disk in the computer and I'd go write because I that was my passion. My passion was writing.
mm, mm.
And that helped relieve the stress because I was dealing with bodily injury car accident claims and really just gnarly stuff. So it's like
Yeah.
I needed that escape and something to fulfill part of me so I had to balance out. And I think that's the thing. If we are constantly not following passion, not and passion sometimes gets construed with making love and all this other stuff. And that's one kind of passion. But when you have a
Mm.
creative passion, that fulfills you in a different way because that's your
Yeah,
calling.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so I think that the gift of being able to follow your passion for as long as you have and to be able to still have the fans coming out and still having people want to follow you and that's a gift in itself because like
Mm,
you were saying, I mean, I can sit here and mention NXS and people are like, "Who?"
mm.
I'm like, how do you not know this?"
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's like I think what happens now is we don't have the longevity. And Ray and I had talked about this on he came on the podcast about fandom is not what it used to be. Fandom used to, everything was there and you had a following that stayed with you. And now everything because we download singles and everything else, it's changed to instant gratification. This is a great song. Okay, what's next?
Yeah. 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 That's true, actually. Uh, but I think what I liked, what is good about. I'm a huge David Bowie fan, and what I liked about that was that such was his impact and his popularity that he felt he could reinvent himself however he liked, and he could get interested in something and become absorbed in something and completely absorb that for a period of time. And then he could just let the creative and artistic freedom to just move into something completely different. And that's a
Hmm.
really cool thing. Because I mean, I was kind of cynical the first time I heard him say it. When the more I thought about it, the more I respected it. But initially, he was saying that an artist should always take risks. You should always feel like you're just out of your depth. And if you feel too comfortable doing what you're doing, then you're making bad art, and you're whatever. And I'm thinking, well, that's easy to say when your record's going to sell at 1 million copies or whatever and stuff. You've got that complete artistic freedom to do whatever you like. When you have a strong established audience, that's easy to say, but in later years, I came to kind of respect that more. I'm thinking, no, he's right. You should never rest on your laurels and stuff. And I think that's what made him great. That's what makes a lot of artists great. Who, you know, um, they don't want to stick to the formula that made them successful. They want to stretch themselves and not play it safe, you know. But I think we always kind of had a little bit of that anyway. I mean, because we were the first people we wanted to please.
Hmm.
You know, we weren't out to please our audience at all. And it was interesting that to varying degrees, every record we made polarized our audience to some extent, you know. Like in the beginning, like when we did Scripts of the Bridge, our first record in '83, we polarized the numbers that wanted to hear 6 or 7 different versions of In Shreds, which was our first single, right? They wanted
Hmm.
it to be more like the Killing Joke drum driving riff orientated anger spew, and of course Script of the Bridge wasn't like that at all. It was a collection of very different tones. And then when we did the second one, um, they all were, you know, it was because it was a departure a little bit from Script of the Bridge, and there's one song on there that was pretty much all done on strings, all done on Selena. Home is where the heart is. We'd never done anything like that before. Or PS Goodbye. We'd never done anything like that before. And that polarized people to a certain extent at the time. And then again, Strange Times did the same thing. And the fourth one did it again because we had a Rastafarian percussionist playing with us on the fourth album, and everybody's going, "Ah, Chameleons have become a fucking reggae band. What's going on?" You know, it's like we've always kind of done that to some degree. And when I was kind of coming into this, I was the one who was kind of worried a little bit about it because we'd not written together for such a long time. And me and Reg, and I'm thinking, you know, oh God, what's it going to be like? And it's like, who cares? Like, as long as we like it. So that's the way we've always been. You know, we just please ourselves. And if it's, we'll be the first to know if it's rubbish. I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, he's right, actually. We should be just pleasing ourselves. So we've carried on with that, really. And I think that's probably why we've had that longevity is that we haven't pandered to any particular formula. Like, oh, now we've got a winning guitar sound, let's stick to it. You know, on the contrary, we've tried to kind of always try to make, you know, we never wanted to make a record that was the same as the last one, even if the differences were subtle, you know. We noticed them, and I think Strange Times is a big departure from Scripts of the Bridge, and I think, you know, Why Call It Anything was a huge departure from all of them. Um, and I think this is a bit of a departure. I think it's the most accessible thing we've done yet, but in a cool way. I like to think it's going to be, you know, there's been a few people that have been involved with us for a very long time, like almost since the beginning. They've heard a few things on this record and just the jaws of it, the floor, you know, they're going to like, it's definitely Chameleons, but this is like not like anything I heard you do before. So, in a good way, but it's not deliberately, we're not deliberately trying to be obtuse, you know, this is, as I say, you know, a lot of the 60s and early 70s influences on this. So it's very melodic what we're doing and very quite accessible, but it's Chameleons doing it. And I think that comes across.
But once again, this goes back to the evolution. And I mean, there are bands, yeah, I pick on this band quite a bit because it was just one of those things when they came out in the 80s. And my sound guy will always disagree with me because it's one of his favorite bands, The Outfield. Every song that was released sounded the exact same. And it's
Mm.
like that's fine. People have a sound like you said. But what is the longevity of that? Are you going to be able to sustain your audience and never evolve because you're playing the same kind of music? And at what point, as a musician, does this get tiring and old for you? Because I understand playing your hits, I get that. But if you're still playing the same type of music 30, 40, 50 years into your career, when does that get
Yeah,
old?
well,
Because you have not evolved.
I think it depends on how. Yeah, I mean, it can depend on if the songs themselves are quite formularized, then I can hear that, you know, and how relevant is it to the people, to newer people that are coming a generation later? You know, how relevant is it to them? And I think if it's still relevant, that's one thing. And I think if it's still, you know, if it's not formularized,
Hmm.
it's, you know, in terms of like you can have the sound, but you're crafting the song. You know, the good songwriting is always going to win out. I think if you're good songwriters, then you know that's going to definitely help as well. Um, I mean, I'm the one to talk really because I've been playing all that legacy stuff. I've been playing it for years and years. But there just reach a point when you want to do something new. And originally, like with when I was doing Vox, I mean, that was all Vox was for, was really to play that stuff. It wasn't really to take it forward at all. And then when Reg came back into the band and all the components that we've got currently, Todd Demmer on drums, Danny keyboards, Steve Rice, now the guitar player, when those elements came in, we felt, oh, okay, now we've got a band that we can take it forward with, you know. So that was the difference. That was the change, was that I think we can take this forward. And, you know, I say partly, not wholly, but it was part of the reason why we did the Legacy EP thing that we just did recently. With we took some very old ideas that we hadn't even a few of them we hadn't even developed beyond their conception. They were pre-Peel, you know, pre-John Peel. I think one of them and a couple of them were on the first Peel session. Was the Fan of the Bells was on the first Peel session, and Things I Wish I'd Said was on the first Peel session, and then we tried to record the Fan and the Bellows with Illinois, and it didn't really work for us, and we just discarded it. I mean, it came out as a retrospective later on, but we just kind of discarded it. And there was one or two other things that we did on the early demos that we just discarded. And I resurrected them for 2 shows in Manchester last Christmas, or not last Christmas, Christmas before. As a history of, we were doing 2 nights, so we decided you know, over the 2 nights we'd work from the very beginning to the end of the band in 2003. And when we did them, like Reg and I looking at each other going, wow, why did we throw these songs away? Why did we play these? And he's like, I don't know, really good. And with the fresh blood that we had with us, they injected their thing into it. It seemed really fresh, and it gave us the impetus then to go into the new session to record the new ideas. It gave us that impetus as well, but it also showed me that that it was possible to revitalize and rejuvenate. It's not all about brand new things. Even the stuff that we've been playing for a while had a new energy and a fresh energy about them. So that was quite good to do that for that reason. And it took us it was almost like going back in time to the very beginning of the group, but where we were at that period where we went that way, which was, you know, Steve Lillywhite in shreds, script to the bridge, that Roland Space Echo guitar sound that Dave developed. We went in that direction. It was almost like we'd gone back in time to that point and gone, okay, well, that's the way we went. Let's go this way now, this way this time. It's like we went off on a tangent a little bit, because we weren't so conscious of not wanting to explore our 60s and early 70s influences, because, you know, the first time around when we did it, as I say, it was post-punk, and we were very much into that, you know, and it was very kind of, we pushed away a lot of those 60s and 70s influences, like, oh my God, you know, post-punk band or a punk band that's influenced by the Beatles, God, no, you can't have that, you know. We were supposed to be anti all that, you know, but then this time around, we're back in that kind of right at the beginning sort of vibe. Well, now we can just like explore the influences that really turn us on. There's nothing hindering us in that, and I think that's really healthy. It was really healthy for us.
How does it make you feel when you now are somebody that influences younger musicians, when you find out that you've influenced somebody?
I think it's great. I think it's really great because I'm not a religious Bob Dylan fan, but I do remember reading an interview with Dylan when I was younger, and he said, people put a similar question to him, and he said, look, we're just links in a chain, man. You know, I'm just another link in that chain, and the people that influenced me, like Guthrie and all that, they were links in that chain, and the people that I turn on are going to be links in that chain, and that's the way I look at it, really. I mean, I'm a big fan of guitar music. I mean, I do like electronic music as well. I mean, I like all kinds of genres of music. But at my heart, I'm still very much, I like to go and listen to and buy records by guitar bands. And if we're turning people onto guitar and making them want to make guitar music, that I feel really great about that, you know. think that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, it's an honor to be part of that tradition, and I hope that the people that we turn on will continue that and turn on their uh, audiences, and because I think we have been. I always regarded us as a musicians band, really. Yeah, that's because a lot of the people that I met after shows, so many of them played themselves or were just learning how to play or had played, or we were a band that musicians kind of liked. So that made me, that makes me feel really good. It makes me feel really proud. Um, to hear that from people when they say that to me, if I hear a band that I really really like and I'm listening to an interview, and they say, "Oh yeah, we really like the Chameleons," it makes me feel really good, because that's great. It's to be part of that tradition is wonderful, really. Yeah, especially if you like what they go on and do.
True, true, very true.
But you don't
Uh,
have to like it,
no, but still, I
Yeah,
mean, and I
yeah,
mean, you may go, well, how did I influence this? But
yeah,
um,
yeah.
so I read that you guys you consider yourself more a live performing band. So I have to ask, what do you really prefer? Do you prefer being working with the audience? Because I mean, there's that energy give and take, as opposed to being in the studio where it's the nucleus of you guys working and coming together to create
I,
something.
I saw they're just the left hand and the right hand of what you do. I mean, I like them. I enjoy being in the studio. I enjoy it crafting together, and I enjoy it when something turns out unexpectedly. You know, like you start an idea and you get the bones of an idea, and you just like focused on arranging it, and then you stand back and you hear it, and you hear the potential of it, and you go, "Oh wow, that's wow, that's going to be that's going to be mega." Yeah, I like that feeling of being surprised by something that starts off as a very simple kind of idea on an acoustic guitar, whatever, and then turns into this something else when everybody gets in on it and elevates it to, and we've had a couple of instances on that, a few instances on that on this album. But playing live for me is where it's at. Yeah, performing is where it's at for me. Like you say, because of the energy of it, and sometimes even for the even it, you know, going into a studio and then you write something in the studio and then record it something in the studio, and then you may be halfway through your record and you may go off and play some shows, and then you may play it. You may play. I mean, it's getting less common that we do that now because of the advent of YouTube and everything. You don't want all your new material on YouTube before you've even finished your record. That's the kind of world we live in now. But when that does happen, I mean, like for example, the single, we wrote the single in the studio and we wanted it out by May specifically, and it was all very rush, rush, rush. And we got the single together and we put it out, and then we went out in May and we were playing it, and just by virtue of playing it live, we improved it. So when we came to record it, when we came to come back in to start work on the album again, we said, right, we're going to completely re-record that song. We're going
Oh, no.
to,
Oh,
and used our single as a demo. Yeah, and there was, I mean, obviously there was reasons for that as well. That at the time, Todd was out of the country in America, and we couldn't get him back. He had other things to do. So Stephen ended up playing drums on the single. So we wanted Todd on it, obviously. So, we recorded it for that as well. But when we did it, just by virtue of playing it live, the times that we'd just been playing it live to promote it, improved it. And I think that can happen quite a lot. You can have a song, you can write a song in the studio, and you can even record it in the studio, but playing it in front of people is going to improve it. And so many of our legacy songs have benefited from that. I mean, the version of Second Skin that appears on Script to the Bridge is, you know, almost like the demo of the version that we perform now. And that version that we perform now is evolved by playing it live. So the two things are very connected. Anyway, but I do prefer to play. I do prefer being on tour and on stage. That's my favorite thing to do. But I love the studio. It's not that I prefer one over the other. They're two very different mediums.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, because you have it's I would say there's more of a strict hierarchy when you're in the studio because you have to have everybody work together to gel. By the time you hit the stage, the songs are pretty much set. You're not trying to negotiate. And granted, you can still change things, but you're not negotiating, well, this needs to go here, this needs to go there with the producer, with the other guys in the band. You know what's happening when you're on stage.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes you do actually. Sometimes you. I mean, we wrote a song on stage once in Berlin at the Loft in '83. We only had half the song,
Okay.
and I remember Dave being really vocal about wanting to do it, and I didn't even have lyrics or anything. I'm like, I said, well, when we get to this point, what's going to happen? He said, I don't know. Something's going to happen, right? Because there's people, you're not just going to stop. It's just whatever we do, we do. And so we did the show and we did the song, and we got to that point, and we all started improvising. Um, and afterwards, I mean, it was really my favorites for a long time. It was one of my favorite shows. In fact, it still remains one of my top three shows ever. But I came off and I was saying to the sound engineer, God, I wish we taped it. And he said, oh, we did. I did
Nice.
tape it. He had a quarter inch tape recorder with him, and he taped the whole thing. So when we went into the studio then to make the record, we had a reference. But we'd literally just written the song or finished the song in front of the audience. So
Nice.
there's a situation where the two things met, because we were so excited by the new idea, we wanted to play it right away, even though we'd only half finished it. And the energy and situation, the situationism of being in front of an audience doing it, you had to do something. We had to do something.
Yeah.
We pulled,
Yeah.
we pulled it out of the hat, and we did it. It was Cold Warm Flesh, and there it is on the album. And actually that gig became a retro released live album called Live in Berlin. I think it came out on Strange Fruit
Nice.
Records. Yeah, Imaginary Records rather, not Strange Fruit. Imaginary Records, the Reeks worked for. They ended up releasing it, so you can actually hear us writing it on stage.
Nice.
It's crazy.
Very
Yeah,
nice. So are
yeah,
you planning on touring in the near future?
yeah. We got quite. We're not. We deliberately kept it not as busy as the last 2 years because we just been playing crazy. I think the year before last we did over 100 shows because we had the COVID. Um, what do you call it? Overspill.
Yeah.
All the stuff that was cancelled from the COVID time. And then, but last year we were up to, I think, like 85, 86. And we're like, but yeah, we are quite busy. We're going out in April we're doing the Twin Tribes thing in April. And then we're going back out because we weren't planning to, but the Psychedelic Furs are touring with the Mission, and the Mission had to pull out for personal reasons, and their management put our name in, and Furs went, yeah, okay, so we're doing 9 or 10 of the Psychedelic Furs tour, and then we're going back before the end of the year to do California and the West Coast up to Seattle, I think, and Portland and Vancouver, maybe. That's in the North Americas, and then over here we're playing a couple of festivals through the summer here and there, and then we're playing Spain, I think, in around June, and Portugal, and then we're going to mainland Europe, and then I think toward the end of the year we've got another UK. So yeah, we've got quite a lot. We've got quite a lot of shows this year, but it's just not as busy as we were last year by design. But obviously we got the new LP as well coming out in September, so we'll be playing around that as well.
Well, also, I asked somebody a couple of days ago about the sheer fact of, are you scared about coming to America now?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm actually a US resident. Um, I, I I have to ask myself, yeah. I mean, it is becoming really scary, to be quite honest with you. And although I saw it coming, I
Yeah.
knew. Uh, I was trying to, you try and warn people, but people have to find out. People do what they believe is right, and I respect that. And but now we've got to deal with the fallout of it.
Trust me, living here.
I yeah, I can believe it. I mean, as I said, like for the last 3 years, I've been a US resident. I have a green card. So, but I've been touring so much. I've been out of the country quite a lot. But um, I have to think. Yeah, it's making me re-examine a lot of things. uh,
Yeah.
about it, and especially, I mean, you'd say, well, okay, a because it's so early, it's so obviously disastrous
Hmm.
in a lot of ways, so early, within the first 100 days or whatever. And you're thinking, God, this is like there's 3 years of this. I mean, where is it going to go, or how bad is it going to get? Because it's already like 10 times worse than I imagined it would be. Um, but then what scares me are all the noises that his cabal are making about a third term and all that, and I'm like, fucking hell, this could be like Putin all over again.
But the thing is, I'm not sure that at 80 years old, I'm not sure that he will be physically healthy enough for that term. But I mean,
Yeah,
I live here and I did not vote for him, and not that anybody needs to know that, but I did not. But I was diagnosed in January with cancer, and it's like
yeah, I
I
heard.
already have stuff to deal with the shit show that is going on, and now you're going to give
Yeah,
me this? Okay.
yeah.
Well, I guess I'll just muddle through and pray that everything keeps going okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's encouraging that you see people willing to come out
Yes.
and protest and be seen and go like, well, for I don't know what it's gonna do, but I'm gonna do it for me. I'm gonna be there. I think that's really encouraging. And then you have to say to yourself, well, okay, um, like you say, I didn't support that. I tried to counter that. It didn't work. He's in the White House. You have no control over that. So you have to kind of, to a certain extent, just let it go,
Hmm.
and say, well, I'll not, I'm not going to, I know who I am and I know what I stand for and I know what I believe is right. And I'll stand up and be counted for that and all of that stuff. I don't mean abstain, but you have no control over it.
No.
Just now that, just like, I mean, people, I mean, I studied history, and the
You
number of
you
people believed that Adolf Hitler was voted in, and he wasn't.
mm,
His popularity was tanking when they made him chancellor. The German establishment did that. Not the German electorate didn't do that. I mean, I know that once he was in and all that, it took hold and stuff. But you just have to, what do you do in that situation? There's so many ramifications of it. We can't control anything. We just have to kind of ride it out and not lose ourselves. Because that's where the real battle is.
oh yeah.
I mean, any of us, when we start trying to live up to our sense of ethics and our friends of right and wrong, it's inside us, where the real battle is. And as long as like we're prepared to stand up for it and not let it change us and not get carried along like a lot of the MAGA people did. A lot of the MAGA people did,
I had a
and even a lot of those now are starting to wake up.
oh yeah.
A lot of them are starting. Yeah,
Well, it's because it's
yeah.
hitting their pocketbook, and it's like, I had a friend whose boyfriend, this is back in like 1989, 90, when he first came out with that book, when Trump first came out, The Art of the Deal. And and so he's telling me how great this guy is, and I just looked at him, I said, I don't like him. And
Yeah.
so when he runs for president the first time, I remember telling people, you think this man who has a golden toilet understands your life?
Yeah,
How? And the
yeah.
truth of the matter is, it goes back to that statement I made earlier about I thought we were past all the racism, but we're not.
No, no,
And
no, no,
and
no.
and he this is the thing. Somebody made a great point the other day. The MAGA people will sit there and support racism and sexism and ageism, but as soon as it hits their pocketbook, they're gonna balk. And
Yeah,
that's exactly where we're
the,
at.
for sure, for sure. And then and I'd seen the reality of that in terms of racism with Brexit. I mean, that was racially motivated. Don't no one's going to convince me that that was economic. It wasn't. It was pure jingoism and because none of the economic arguments made any sense at all. They didn't make any sense at all. It was a load of bullshit. And it was easy to enter, and I'm not even, I mean, economics are like a dark arts to me. I don't fucking understand economics, and that's the
But
reason
it,
why. I would, I would decline to make it. At the time, I likened it to an episode of The Simpsons where, would you make Homer Simpson the boss of the nuclear power plant? You wouldn't, would you? And that's exactly what they did in Britain. Like by passing it over to a referendum, they gave the most important economic decision in the history of the country to Homer Simpson and said, "You decide." And we're not qualified. That's the reason why we need Cambridge and Oxford graduates of economics
yeah.
because they understand economics. We don't. It's a completely crazy, insane, dark, mystic, magical science that nobody seems to kind of get. That works. We don't
Well,
know why it works, and yeah,
it's like the cabinet members that are picked for this. It's all there. Nobody is qualified for any of it, and I think
no,
part of the problem with the cult that we have is you remove critical thinking and you put on Fox News and they're telling you this whole diatribe of untruths because we've created
mm,
infotainment. And the fact of the matter is if somebody is not willing or has the time to look outside of that, they're willing to
yeah.
have those thoughts fed and therefore we're having a problem. And I know right now the conversation we're having could get my ass arrested. I know that because I'm being non-loyal. Well, guess what? I'm not loyal. I
That
think this.
doesn't that, but that highlights the precariousness of where we're at right now. The fact that you're talking about modern America in
Mhm.
the terms of like you can't even speak out without fear of being victimized. It's just insane to
Mhm.
me. But I think the greatest betrayal I think is the way he's betrayed the veterans.
Yes.
I mean,
Oh, oh,
they were his staunchest supporters, and they've just been kicked right in the balls.
wait. Apparently today he wants a 4 mile long parade, military parade for his birthday.
Does he? Well, let's
Like
see.
any good dictator.
Yeah, let's see how that pans out.
Seriously, and I mean, it's like you couldn't even
But
show up for these four military men that were transferred over to our country. You couldn't do that.
no, I think that what you've got going for you in the United States that they didn't have going for them in the Soviet Union, in the former Soviet Union, and in Russia, is that the architects of all of this are pretty stupid fucking people. They don't have the intelligence, they don't have the cunning intelligence that we've seen in other regimes that have been necessary to make this kind of system work for
Yeah.
them. And they're so obviously inept and so obviously stupid. You have to be pretty clever to engineer something like that. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? In the history shows us, that they've been pretty fucking clever about how they've done it. And I know he's working to the Putin blueprint. That's probably where that's probably where they've got it from. The how are you going to systematically do it? How are you going to dismantle the constitutions and
But
put change the constitution so that you can govern from the shadow,
but
and all that. Putin did,
let's
but
be
he's not
honest.
clever enough.
No, but
Huh?
let's be honest here. The one
Mm,
thing, and you brought up history, and yes, I studied history just as much. The fact of the
mm.
matter is, all these people that have done this kind of bullshit, everyone, the French Revolution, hello, it doesn't end well
Yeah.
for the person that tries to be the would-be dictator.
No, no, it doesn't. But I don't know, and it's the long-term ramifications
Hmm.
of it as well. That I mean, when I came to looking at 20th century history, that's what fascinated me the most. Where you had you know you had the emergence of fascism in the wake of Italian fascism spreading its way through, and then you had the Germanic repercussions of the humiliations of the First World War, leading to all of the arguments that we used and all of scapegoats that we used to establish that brutal kind of regime. And then you had World War II, which obviously was a horrible, horrible thing. But then the ramifications of that out into the collapse of colonialism in Southeast Asia, the rise of Zionism, which gives you the Middle East conflicts. Again, the collapse of colonialism in South Africa highlights the South African situation. You've got the Iron Curtain and the Soviets' refusal to withdraw from liberated territory from the Nazis. And then you have the nuclear proliferation, which is a race against time at the time against the Nazis, because the Nazis were also working on developing a nuclear weapon. And so you had all of these ramifications that became massive, massive 20th century problems. All of the 20th century problems that we had were completely, uh, as a result, were consequentially as a result of what happened in the Second World War. So you ask yourselves whether um, is this something that the United States has to go through to reach something else, or what? Because this is here you have pure all of the I personally believe all of the adverse um, unsavory things about capitalism you have embodied in this person. And I'm not a socialist by any means, don't
No,
get me wrong, I'm not.
I
But if you were to take all of the ugliness for all of the the idealistically commendable things about free enterprise system and all of that, you've got the dark side of it, the ugly side of it, and that to me is personified in this person and in the people that are around him, that are just fucking greed,
mm-hmm. Well,
and disregard and no empathy and disregard for humanity and all that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the funny thing. People scream about socialism, but the fact of the matter is we already have socialist programs in this country. And I supported Bernie
Now,
Sanders, democratic
yeah,
socialist,
yeah,
But
yeah,
but the,
yeah.
the interesting things, if you want to, besides history, astrology, which I know is funny for some, we have Pluto returning to a certain point. Where Pluto is returning is the same place it was in the American Revolution, the Civil War, and the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So, right on time, here's
Mm.
democracy blowing up, and they always say democracy can only last about 250 years. We've already hit that point. We've already
Yeah,
hit that point.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I'm talking like a social. There are certain things I believe in society that aren't shouldn't be run as a profit and loss
Oh,
system, and fresh water and accommodation and your transport system, your power, um, and your medical aid. All of those things are utilities that you provide for your workers, for your working classes and your middle classes, and all that kind of thing. Education, all these things. The idea that you run them as a profitable business. I mean, that came really out of Thatcherism, which then led to Reaganomics and all the
hmm.
idea that you run a country like a company. You close down parts of that aren't profitable. You sell them off to the private sector. I mean, that was Thatcherism in a nutshell. And there are certain things that they're not meant to be in the hands of private profiteers.
Well,
Fresh water, for example.
and
People say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the wrong with, I mean, we had a situation in the United Kingdom where our fresh water is in the hands of private companies that don't want to spend the money upgrading the filtration systems, so people get sick from drinking the water out of the tap. Because private companies don't want to spend that money. Do you
right.
understand what I mean? So I don't believe that that's political. See, I think that's social. There's a social politic, and there's a politic. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not socialist in the terms of in the strict sense of the word. I'm not a Marxist or anything, but
It's m-
but
it's more
some
because
things are beyond that. Yeah, some things are social. You know.
that's why it's more
So
of a democratic socialist, because it is something that is
yeah,
for
exactly.
it's for people. And
Yeah.
the bigger picture that nobody's really talking about is, there's the whole thing in America about they took our jobs. The fact of the matter is, pretty soon worldwide, automation and AI is going to take over many jobs. And then we're
Mm-hmm.
going to have to contend with that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
how do we, at that point, how do you survive as a people?
yeah, exactly. You need new, you know, it's calling for a new paradigm,
Yes.
and we'll either get it or we won't. It'll either the systems will either completely and utterly collapse or evolve, and hopefully it'll be the latter. You know, because there are some really interesting ideas on how to formulate a free society. It doesn't, you know, necessarily have to be communistic in its approach, but there are ways. There are very interesting ideas out there um, if you want to go and look and find, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking
No,
about
no.
people general want to find them. They're there. You
Hmm.
know, they're radical ideas, some of them, and but they're workable. You know, they are actually workable. It's whether or not we have enough um, empathy, for want of a
Right.
better, to want to build a society like that, or whether we want to continue to be in this self-serving kind of idea of competitiveness, you know,
Well,
where we
and
just we're just competing with each other.
one thing I want to
It's
say,
mainly patriarchal. I think we
well,
should go
yes,
towards a matriarchal.
yes.
I advocate a more matriarchal kind of
Well,
system than the patriarchal one.
and the one interesting thing is, the whole slogan of "Make America Great Again." Well, if we were going to make America great again, when we were fiscally doing well, oh,
Mm.
there would have been no billionaires. They would have been taxed. We would have had health. We would have had good schools, good roads. We had the GI Bill, and all of that was based on taxes and companies paying taxes. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're going to make America great again by giving the rich tax breaks. What?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I like the commentary. I forget where it originated, but somebody like put their head up and went, "What do you mean again? Make America great
Yeah,
again?
yeah.
When was America great? You know, was it when was it great?
It
Was it
really wasn't. I mean, that's the thing. We've hidden, especially here in this country, we've hidden truths that we didn't know about the Oklahoma bombing. We didn't know about, and I'm not talking about the one in the 90s. Um,
no?
we didn't know that Central Park was once something totally different than it is. We didn't know those things because they
Yeah,
didn't want us to know. And to me, when you look at, back in first time he ran, every time I saw a sign in somebody's yard, all I could think was your racism is showing. Because that's
yeah,
truly what you're trying to do is make America great again, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
yeah. Because I mean, you know, America was great in the 50s and the 60s. Well, it depends what color your skin was. You know, I
Exactly.
mean, you know, it's like when was it great? And I think you know we had a glimpse of potentially how great it could be when you had Kennedy. And what
Hmm.
did they do? They killed him. And I say they killed him.
Yeah, I know.
They killed him. You know, was what that my favorite quote from that movie that Oliver Stone made was like Camelot and Smithereens. That's exactly how the right regarded it.
Yeah.
Like pour kerosene over the idea of a golden age, Camelot. You know, where you start talking to the Russians and saying, we've all got children. We're all families. Do we
Yeah.
really want to escalate to the point where we're going to annihilate each other, like over the Cuban thing? Are we going to do we? You know, we breathe the same oxygen. We have children. We have families. You know, can we be human beings towards each other and then be labelled a traitor for talking that way to your enemy? You know what I mean? That's where it all went wrong for me. 1963, November the 22nd.
I mean,
But you
we are
know,
done,
who
but
knows?
but this is the thing. It's like we really have to look at us as a global place because choices somebody else makes in a different country, that country is now looked upon as bad. And the fact of the matter is, it's not just the country, it's the people there. And a lot of us don't want what's going on. But
No.
unfortunately, our hands are tied. Like you said, we can't do anything about it.
You know, this is crazy. You've got this crazy national system idea, this jingoism. That I mean, I'm from Britain. I know I've my experience of jingoism coming from the United Kingdom, um, where even the language is baffling to me. You know, we had Theresa May standing up and saying, "Well, I'm going to try to, you know, we're going to have to make some concessions, but we're not." But we're not going to give up. We're not going to give way on freedom of movement. We're not. There's absolutely no way. And I'm like, think about what that says, right? When we're anti-freedom of movement.
Yeah.
Whenever you put anti with freedom, it's never going to be a good thing.
No.
And and I could not, for the life of me, understand how people with families, people with children, would back something like that. When your children hopefully are going to go to university, hopefully, and they're going to graduate, and then they're going to look out and have like maybe 28, 29 different territories that they can go and find work in. You've taken that away from them.
Hmm.
You've taken that completely away from them now. Um, I mean, my industry was completely ignored. It's $1 billion industry, but it's completely ignored. We weren't even part of the conversation. Artists and musicians weren't even part of that conversation. It's just like completely closed down. This idea of of being able to roam around in relative freedom and be a community rather than be a secular kind of territory. This is our place, and I'm like, I think I'd rather have the Europeans out looking after my interests than the British government, because the British government were um, negotiating the Maastricht Treaty. They were trying to make United Kingdom the cheap labour force for the rest of Europe. They were selling their own people out. When the Europeans wanted a citizens' charter, the British were saying we want the right to veto that, right? They were reasoning that if they could go to like Japanese car makers or whatever it was and say, well, come and build your factory here because you don't have to do this for the workers, you don't have to do it. You go to Germany or you go to Holland, you've got all these obligations to your but here you don't have them because we veto the treaties. Do you understand? It's like
Hmm.
you have all the British talking about us and them against Europe, but our own governments were selling out our own working classes when the rest of the Europeans were trying to get the best possible deal for theirs,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So where does the loyalty? I was in despair. I was absolutely in despair. Brexit was our Trumpism. Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
It was just more of a buffoon than fucking Trump is, you know. And I was thinking, well, he got there by default, right? Because the prime minister resigned, and they all voted to make him the leader, and he became prime minister by default. Get a general election, they'll kick his fat ass out of there. No, they actually ratified it and voted for him, and I was like, I am so done with this place. It's like, get me out of here. This is
What
ridiculous. You know what I mean?
it's like I went to bed on election night in 2016 and Hillary was in the lead and I'm like, okay, everything will
Yeah.
be okay. I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I looked at my phone and I'm like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
Same thing this time. Kamala seems to be doing okay. There's no way this is gonna work.
Mm, I know.
And then yeah. And I mean I look at like the alleged attempt on certain people. Well, one attempt, the one that had the bomb at the golf course, apparently he was over at Mar-a-Lago hanging out recently. And I'm like,
Mm,
how do you guys not see things as they truly are? And
yeah.
at that point, I just look at it and go, you had people with the 700 Club with Jim and Tammy Baker back in the day, which was the religious
Yeah.
cult. And so here we are. We had Jim Jones. Here we are. It's the same thing. People
Yeah.
want to believe what they want to believe.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so one of the songs on the record, I say, saviors they're a dangerous thing. Saviors can be a very dangerous thing. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? When you start drinking the Kool Aid, and at the end of the day, um, given your own ethics and your own sense of empathy, nobody's going to come along and save you. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous,
I
especially
didn't.
especially that, man.
I'm sorry if we went there and that bothered you. I'm sorry about that, but I
No, it
think this
doesn't
is a
bother
good
me. No,
conversation.
absolutely. You know what? A year ago, I would have been like stressing about it and all of that and stuff. But I went through something of my own. I had my own kind of epiphany and transition over Christmas and New Year that's completely chilled me out in a lot of ways. And I've realized that uh, I'm not going to get like stressed and worked up about things that I have no control over.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let what I can control. I'm just going to let that go, um, and just focus on what's in here and focus on my own ethics and my own arena. I think it was in the novel. The Last Temptation of Christ, the actual novel, where the opening, I think it's in the introduction where he says, you know, the arena is his soul is the arena where these armies clash and meet. You know, this is where the real battle between good and evil is in your own soul, and that's the only thing you can control. You
Yeah,
know, I can't control global politics. I can't control. I can despair, but what's the point of that?
true.
It's you know you've just got to. But stand up and be counted by all means. I'm not advocating what do you call it, detachment and lethargy. Or I mean, I admire people that turn up and be counted, stand up and be counted, like what happened on Saturday. I think
Yeah.
that's great.
Well, they're going to do it
But
again.
it has to get bigger. I mean, I remember the anti-war under when George W. Bush was president, and you had 1 million people marching in the streets of New York then, and in other cities around the world. You had like millions of people, and the only comment that was made by the people that were stirring this was like, yes, look, see, isn't democracy a wonderful thing? That's democracy in action. Well, yeah, nothing changes, but and you saw it in the '60s as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
With the anti-Vietnam thing. But if enough people, because my partner disputes this. She's a student, a big student of psychology and personality disorders and all that kind of thing. She kind of disputes it really, but I don't. I agree with the 26 psychologists that wrote the book some years ago, saying this is what you have. Here's a malignant narcissist, and with the one thing that he can't stand is the idea of his own popularity waning.
Oh, yeah.
He can't stand criticism. He has this pathological desire to be loved and worshipped, and you take that away from him, he starts to go to pieces. And I think the more people that can show that they're not prepared to allow this snotball to shit on the Constitution, which you know, I am not even American, and even I regard the United States Constitution as one of the greatest documents ever fucking um, engineered and ever authored in the history of the fucking. I think it's one of the greatest documents that the human race has ever made, and he's just completely crapping all over it. And I think more people that stand up to that. I think that's great. That's what it needs.
The one
I
thing
think
that
it will. I think it will crumble.
Oh, I do too, and I think this. I have said this too since 2016. He is the emperor, the fairy tale. The emperor has no clothes. The
Yeah,
emperor's new clothes, because
yeah,
he has to surround himself by yes men. It doesn't matter that he's walking down the street
exactly.
naked, but hey,
No, yeah. Because anybody that knows anything about business says like it takes a particular kind of moron to bankrupt a casino, not once but multiple times.
hmm
Casinos are money making machines. You can't
hmm
you can't go wrong. But he did
yeah,
more than once.
yeah.
I mean, everything he's touched in business has turned to shit. So I mean, the fact that you would let people like that um, handle the economy is a nightmare. You know,
hmm
but. The thing that's going to do it is people um, and people making sure that his popularity ratings plummet. Definitely get out on the street and show your displeasure that way. But there needs to be a degree of bureaucratic resistance within the system itself. You know, because let's face it, a lot of presidents have been stomped by bureaucratic resistance
Well,
and became lame duck presidents. I mean, it happened to Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter was one of the good ones.
and here's the thing about that. You had the whole Republican Congress and Senate. They are so scared of being primaried, but they're missing the
Yeah.
big point here. You're scared of being
Mm.
primaried, but your constituents who are getting pissed off at you are going to primary
Yeah.
you anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
That's where it's going to come from to get control of the house back.
mhm,
That's what it's going to take, and it's going to, I think history will show who are the rat bastard cowards and who are the heroes.
exactly,
You know, like that,
exactly.
like that, like that Democrat guy that stood up and what was he? How long was he
Cory
talking
Booker,
for?
over 25
Uh,
hours and 4 minutes, I think.
Amazing! What a
hmm
what a hero! What
hmm
a what a hero! That's the kind of uh, thing that we need to see. But we
Exactly.
also it needs to be bipartisan. It needs to be we need as many Republican uh, politicians to recognise for the insanity that it is and come over. And I think that's starting to happen a little bit, though.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I
yeah.
agree. I have taken up
Yeah.
more than more. I mean, I could sit here and talk to you all day. Um, but I'm sure you got plans. I know you were going to go out and everything. So, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to add?
I've really enjoyed our conversation, and you know, I haven't got into areas that I don't normally get into. To be quite honest with you, you caught me. I usually, you know, kind of reserved about talking about politics because I don't, you know, I don't profess to be to tell people how to live or anything like that. But no, I mean, I hope that people will really respond to this record. I hope our audience likes it, and I hope we'll get more people maybe listening to us who might not have wanted to listen to us before. Uh, Maybe we'll hopefully bring in some new listeners and stuff like that. But I'm looking forward to playing the shows, and I'm going to tell it like it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. So if they want to kick me out, they can. I don't care.
Well, thank
I
you for
really
coming.
don't. I really don't.
Thank
I'm
you for.
moving to Berlin anyway this year, so I
Well,
want to
there
move
you
here
go.
permanently anyway. So, yeah,
Well,
save me a
thank you.
whole load of paperwork if they deport me.
Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome.
The conversation definitely went somewhere I don't think that either one of us, Vox or myself, thought it was going to go. Um, and he even said to me afterwards that he normally does not talk about politics, but he was glad that we did. And I think it's something that's important that needs to be addressed. And we weren't, neither one of us, please understand that neither one of us were trying to sway anybody on how to vote. We were just speaking of how the world is at this point, and that may be things that need to be changed. But you're entitled to vote for who you want to vote for. You can disagree with me about my political stance, that's fine. But please understand that when I discuss politics, I want the world to be a better place. I want the world to be on equal footing because you can't necessarily listen to people that have an agenda. And I don't have an agenda. I'm not sitting here telling you how to vote. I just want people to realize that when somebody sits there and says they took our jobs, the fact of the matter is corporations move those jobs overseas. That's why we don't have manufacturing here in this country. And automation is going to take more jobs. In fact, I just watched a video where, well, gee, you can pick up a cake and you can put it in a machine and it'll decorate it for you. So there goes another person's job. Granted, it's not going to be the customized cake that you want, but as AI grows and technology grows, where do people find a job? Hey, I could get an AI host for my podcast. Yeah. An AI host is not going to steer the conversation the way I do. And not that I'm steering it, it's just things that pop in my head randomly. So, one other thing I want to talk about before I really dive deep into Vox is what you see here is from a chemo port. And the only reason I'm pointing it out is because I had to wear a shirt kind of because it's aggravating, the covering it up. So, yeah, it's only about a week old, and it's so when I get chemo, they don't have to find a vein because apparently what I was told is that kind of your veins disappear while you're in chemo. Yay! I already had hard veins, so yeah. So this will stay with me for about 6 months after my chemo treatments, and then it gets removed because there's a possibility for infection. So that's a little bit about the chemo journey. Not that we needed to go there, but anybody that's watching the video is going to sit here and go, "What in the hell's why she got a bruise on her chest?" That's why. Anyway, so when we talk about Vox and the new record that's going to come out on September 12th, Arctic Moon, he admits that it's a departure, but his music has always evolved. And that's the thing. The Chameleons have evolved. And that really, when you think about it, is the apropos title. A chameleon changes its colors. So, as far as a musician, you have to be willing to evolve at times. I'm not saying to keep up with trends, but to keep up with your own passion and your own desire to create music that is not only your signature style, but to garner new fans and to evolve. Because as technology increases, so does the need to change your own music. And I'm not saying that you have to go and put samples on or anything, but you evolve. And that's really when you think about the whole conversation, the political conversation, everything that's going on, your music, your life, you're constantly evolving. And if you're not, then you're missing out on something. And part of that distraction is, and yes, I'm on my phone, and I admit that part of that distraction is being on the phone. Um, One of the things I had recently seen was somebody talking about creating boredom for yourself. And this is how you're going to rewire your brain because whether we admit it or not, we have rewired ourselves. And if we don't have that time to take that creative passion and do something with it because, well, we're doom scrolling, because the peace that we have, the happiness that we have has now been taken away because of what I read on social media. I mean, how do you stop that? How do you stop being plugged in all the time? And I think if you're plugged in all the time, you're not allowing yourself to be able to create. Yesterday I found myself sitting down because I really wanted to write, and I had nothing. I had nothing at all. I went back and looked at some old writing, and I started questioning my ability as a writer. And that's something that when you are detached and you can't really, because you have so much going on and so much from the outside world is coming at you, you can't detach and find that creative element because you are so drained. So to spark your creativity, sometimes you need to just detach from everything. Find the people that help resonate you, that help lift you up, that help inspire you, and take a page from what they do. You know, as Vox was talking about the evolution, you know, that his songwriting has a more mature feeling. And it's the same thing as I was saying in the podcast. When I look at my characters back in the day, I had a very limited amount of life experience. And now I've gone through so many different things that I can incorporate into my own work. And I think that if we step back, and I'm not even talking about the creative aspect, if we step back and look at our lives and really appreciate what we have in our lives, the people in our life, even if it was somebody that came into our life and really fucked shit up, that's okay because it taught us a lesson. It taught us to really look at ourselves and where do we value ourselves? Do we value ourselves? Because a lot of times in friendship, relationships, whatever, we will end up trying to give somebody else something else. And we devalue ourselves because we're not standing on our principle. And I'm not saying you have to stand on your principle 100% of the time because that'll get your ass kicked too. But you have to know who you truly are. And if something is toxic for you, you have to be willing to see that person or that situation for what it is and say, bye. And I know that doesn't fit with anything we're talking about, but in a way it does because, like he was discussing, he's a British citizen. He has a green card in the US. He's moving to Germany. Let that sink in. He's most likely lived in Britain most of his life, but he's moving to Germany because guess what? I don't fit anymore. And I think that's the bigger picture that we have to look at when we really look at our lives. Some people stay in a marriage because, well, yeah, I've been in it this long. I don't want to change. Well, that's okay. But do you really fit in? Are you really happy? Are you just biding your time? Are you just because it's comfortable? Um, I had that situation with my grandmother when she was in a care facility. She had alleged that her neighbor was stealing her diapers, her adult diapers. And I'm like, okay. And I had a meeting and I'm like, let's get you moved. And she's like, no. And I'm like, why not? Because I know what I got here. I know the situation. And I think that happens a lot in a lot of, be it a job, be it a relationship, be it a friendship. When you know what you have, what is expected of you, and what you expect of them, and what you get from them, your expectations are lower. You'll allow yourself to just go, okay, I surrender. This is what it is. And we have to get out of that. We have to stop going and appeasing other people and going, okay, it's all right. It's all good. We can't do that anymore. We have to start looking at the bigger picture and finding some place that gives us joy and bliss and offers us hope and trying to lift other people up. I'm not saying, don't do, here's the oxygen mask. I'm going, take care of yourself first and then see what you can do for others. Because we have to unite and we have to stand tall and we have to support one another. Because the truth of the matter is, and this is something that most people lose the fact on, and it's something Vox touched on. when he was talking about 1963. The fact of the matter is, we're all in this together. We all breathe the same air. We all eat, maybe not the same food, but if we ruin the soil, then our food becomes toxic. If we turn over our water systems to people that don't want to maintain them, then we're drinking toxic water. And it's all based on somebody else's greed. Instead of us coming together and doing what needs to be done as a collective for the world, I'm not sitting here saying let's be all socialist, although I do support democratic socialism because I think there is democracy involved. And we already have socialist programs here in this country, as I stated, with the library system, with the army, with the fire department. Most of those are socialist programs, even the police department, because they're government funded. But we really need to look at the bigger picture. What's happening here when we take apart the fact that we want to take away the CDC, we want to take away the World Health Organization, we don't want to be part of that. Okay. And you don't want to track measles cases and you don't want to track this. This is tantamount to some little kid going, nah, nah, nah. No, it's not going to stop it. You're not. And then we fired the people that stop Ebola, but oh wait, we got to get those people back. I mean, when I sit here and look at the bigger picture, I just think, wow, what a shit show. But, and I am digressing off of the music and off of the interesting part of the conversation about his life as a musician, because I think we kind of ignited just this big spark at the end of the political discourse. I can't go out and protest. I would love to, but because of what I'm going through right now, I am compromised and I just don't have the energy. But that doesn't mean I can't make my own protest here. And like I said, I could get arrested for this. But so if I suddenly disappear, there's one of two things that happen. But I don't think I will, but we'll see. I've never been in trouble with the law in my life, so let's hope this isn't the first time. But anyway, um, I think I think if you have the chance to pick up the record, it's coming out on September 12th. Definitely pick up Arctic Moon. It's a mature level of songwriting, and the music has grown, and that's the thing. You have to look at a musician's career, one that has been in the business so long and that is still creating music, and see development and see how you've changed because you're not the same person you were in your teens and your 20s and your 30s. Hell, I'm not the same person I was when I entered 50. But that being said, it's evolution. It's looking at who we are, and that's the journey of life. So, find your passion today if you can. Find some joy if you can. I know it's a shit show. I know the world is feels like it's just spinning out of control. And all we're doing is trying to hang on. But hang on we must. And we have to keep going. So, on that note, I'm sorry about the diatribe, folks. But, I'm sure at this point you've already muted me or you've said bye. But if you haven't, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to my take. And I appreciate that. And I'd like to thank Rich Sy from 30 Year Audio Productions for doing the audio. I'd like to thank Fast Susie for the intro and outro music. And most importantly, I'd like to thank you guys for listening because without you, I wouldn't have a show. Um, and that's the gift here. That's the gift about being able to reach out to the world and say what needs to be said, calling out truth if possible. So, thank you for listening, guys. And whether it's morning, noon, or night, I really do appreciate it. I really, really do. So, on that note, I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.